The New York Giants' last chance for win this season could come this Sunday against a New Orleans Saints team that is 1-4 on the road. What needs to happen? How can the Saints play the spoiler? And can the Saints defense, which hasn't been very good, arise to the occasion? We have all that and more on today's special crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Saints. That's coming your way next.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Today's crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Saints is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL, written in all lowercase letters, to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Hello, everybody. Welcome on in to a special crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Saints. My name is Patricia Traina. I'm the host of Locked On Giants, and he, of course, is Ross Jackson, the host of Locked On Saints. One of my favorite people. Look at that smile, people.
You are.
Wow, you are my friend. I've been looking forward to this crossover edition literally all year long. Ross, thanks so much for joining in. I'm excited to talk about this weekend's game, Giants, Saints. The Saints struggling a little bit on the road. You know, they've had some turnover. The Giants have had some struggles of their own. We're going to talk about all that. We'll give you guys the key storylines for the Saints, who are the visitors, the Giants, and we'll talk about the Giants in the next segment. And then, of course, we will give you the keys to victory. So everything you want to need to know about this game, we got it for you here on Crossover Thursday. All right, Ross Jackson, let's talk about the Saints. What do we need to know about the boys from the Bayou?
Ooh, well, I'll tell you what, this is a banged up New Orleans Saints team with a brand new head coach. Everything that you might have prepared for when you and I spoke preseason around this, none of them are a part of the team anymore. Forget all of it, scratch it all. They're all gone. Everybody's gone. The New Orleans Saints are an entirely different team at this point. And I think the biggest thing for them, starting with the offensive side, is offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak has to prove that he can call a game and win a game without Taysom Hill, who suffered a season-ending ACL injury last week in their loss up against the Los Angeles Rams. He's been a core part of what that team has been able to do, particularly on the ground. And there's a lot of criticism out there around Clint Kubiak not being able to win games and not being able to put together an offensive attack without Taysom Hill. So this is going to be a big test for him this weekend to be able to show that he can do that.
Ross, you know, one thing I wanted to ask you about the Saints that I'm kind of curious about, they made a change a few weeks back. They replaced Dennis Allen with Darren Rizzi. Mm-hmm. What kind of differences do you notice in the team? I know under Rizzi, I think they won their first two games that they played under him. But what do you notice as being maybe the most significant difference in the Saints?
Yeah, I think New Jersey native Darren Rizzi, by the way, just to make sure that's out there. He's super excited to be able to go home, and he's a Bergen Catholic grad, so he's super excited to be out there this week to get started and continue this going. But I think the big thing that you've seen from this team under Rizzi is energy. Energy's been the big thing. And sort of the buy-in of this team. I mean, everything down to like the locker room being full, to position groups being next to one another in the locker room. All of a sudden, they kind of kept the COVID adjustment of everybody all spread out so that one person didn't come in direct contact with everybody in their position group and all those other things. Little adjustments like that have just kind of created and kind of reignited the culture here for this New Orleans Saints team. So I think that's been a big part of it. And the other thing too is that it gives you two play callers and a leader, a figurehead at head coach. And so everybody's kind of a little bit more refocused. He's even made some adjustments on the coaching staff and stuff like that to kind of get people in different responsibilities. And so all those things have kind of been the differences and kind of zhuzhes that he's made throughout this season since he took over. But honestly, I think the big thing is just that you see guys that are kind of playing with their hair on fire and going out there and playing kind of with in energy and maybe a I don't want to call it a commitment, but certainly an energy and a passion that we started to not see as that team underwent a 7-game losing streak in the middle of the season.
And Ross, a surprise to me has been the Saints defense. I mean, it's been bad.
Yeah, this has been a rough season.
There?
Yeah, real rough season. And look, a lot of people sometimes will say, well, they fired the head coach who was also the defensive play caller and was the architect of the defense. So of course defense is bad. No, it was bad before then too. It was especially over in the run game. The Saints were 24th 2 years ago in the run defense, 22nd last year in run defense. They were 24th again going into last week. And then of course got, torched all over again by the Los Angeles Rams in the run game by both running back Kyren Williams and Blake Corum. And so, look, I just think that there's something about maybe the system, something about where the Saints have been over the course of the past 3 years. I think a lot of people point to execution and stuff like that. But I mean, I'm sure you looked at the numbers. Yards before carry, terrible. Yards before contact, terrible. Yards after contact, terrible. Yards allowed on the outside run, terrible. Yards allowed on the inside run, terrible. It's just not been there for New Orleans. And so that's what I think is going to be another big thing for this team this week, is that they've got to be able to show that they can win over on the defensive side. And the run defense, if it's not going to improve, I can tell you that. It's not going to get better this late in the season. So they're going to have to counteract some of the other things, which is they've allowed a ton of explosive plays so far this year as well. So it's just been a defensive unit that has not been well coached, that has not executed well, and that lost its, architect halfway through the season. And of course, you're going to continue to struggle when that happens. And oh, by the way, they traded away Marshawn Lattimore, their starting cornerback at the trade deadline, and their other starting quarterback, Paulson Adebo, went down with a broken fibula, which never happens in the NFL. So those things I'm sure contributed as well.
When it rains, it pours, right?
That's right.
Now, Ross, on the offensive side, you mentioned the Taysom Hill injury, and Derek Carr, I think, has also been inconsistent throughout the season. But let's talk about the Hill injury and just what that does. How does that change the complexion of the Saints offense and what they can do?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because there's a short-term conversation and a long-term conversation. I'll stick to the short-term conversation because the long-term conversation is maybe more built for, the offseason and things like that. But the short-term conversation is that they have to find a way to produce without Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill has played quarterback, running back, fullback, slot receiver, wide receiver, tight end, both inline and split out wide, has been a fullback for the team, has been a kick returner, punt returner, kick coverage, punt coverage, has been the team's backup long snapper. He's also been the personal punt protector, rushed on punts, and blocked and protected on punts and kickoffs as well. So that's the guy that you lost, right? That's tough. And how do you replace that with one player? That's kind of the short-term impact of this. When you have one guy that did all of those things, we're not talking about somebody that, next man up. We're talking the rest of the team now has to step up to be able to kind of pick up some of the production that Taysom Hill has brought. And I don't think, did I mention that he's played quarterback as well? I don't know if I even mentioned that. So there's
Does
also
he get multiple checks or just one?
He gets one, but it's a big one.
I would hope so. I would hope so. My goodness, that's a lot of roles that he plays. And Ross, before we switch over to the Giants, I got to ask you: the Saints are 1-4 on the road. Why do you think they've struggled so much outside of the dome?
They struggle in the dome too, so it hasn't been particularly.
But they have a better record
them anywhere. But they do have a better record. But it's interesting because in the past recent years, they've been better on the road than they've been at home, and so it's interesting to see. So look, I think that there were a couple different things. They went on the road immediately after losing their starting center, lost a couple of those games. They had to go on the road with a backup quarterback. I don't think that helped them either. Going to LA, playing in some of those games. But I just think that this is just a team. It's not really that they've struggled on the road specifically. It's that they've struggled. It just has not been their year, whether it's injury related, whether it's execution related, whether it's play calling or coaching related. It's been a big time moving target for this New Orleans Saints team. And I think the Saints would like to get 3 games won within 4 for the first time this season, if they can do that this weekend, to not necessarily right the ship, but maybe lessen the blow a little bit by the time that the season's all said and done.
All right, so the Saints are a mess, but we've got a bigger mess in New York that we have to talk about. So coming up after the break, we're going to talk about the New York Giants, the banged up New York Giants, the lost New York Giants. That's coming your way next on this crossover edition. Locked on Giants, Locked on Saints. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you in part by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The New York Giants are currently a 4.5-point underdog against the New Orleans Saints with the over-under set at 40.5. But will a Drew Lock-led offense that last week scored 20 points be able to pull off the upset for the Giants and give them their first home win this season? That's just some of the many different bets and odds and whatnot you can find on FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's crossover episode of Locked On Giants, Locked On Saints is brought to you in part by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including literature, mathematics, fine arts, history, economics, and so much more. There's no better way to expand your knowledge and challenge your mind than to open it to learning something new from Hillsdale College's vast catalog of online courses. Enroll today for free at hillsdale.edu/lockedon. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. All right, everybody, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Saints. He is Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. And I am Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants.
One of my favorite people in the whole wide world.
Oh, you can tell Ross and I just have this love affair going. He's the best. But we are talking Giants, Saints, and, probably no love lost between these two teams because these two teams just, whenever they get together, something funky really happens.
Games are always so weird, right?
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. But anyway, let's talk about what's going on in the land of the Giants. Now, the Giants on Wednesday, head coach Brian Daboll announced that Drew Lock will get the start. Tommy DeVito is still dealing with the forearm injury. They kept him out of the Dallas game, but he is making progress. And basically, if Tommy is healthy enough, he will be QB2 behind Drew Lock. But Drew Lock doing some good things against Dallas. A couple of turnovers, which were still a problem. But, one of the turnovers you can say really not his fault because it was a pass deflection. The fumble was his fault. But Drew Lock, quick decision making, just seemed to function better in the offense, didn't hold the ball as long. So a lot of good things done by Drew Lock, some bad things, but they've been working on it. And Drew Lock, speaking to the media today, said, it was kind of like just getting back on the bicycle. You don't really forget it, but you have to kind of get used to it at first especially when you're playing in a new system. And this was really his first extensive action in this Giants offense. It's a little different than what he ran when he was with Seattle and with Denver. So, a little adjustment period, if you will, for Drew Lock. But here's the thing, folks. We have injuries to talk about. Hey, what else?
Before we go to that, can I ask you something about the Drew Lock situation?
Sure.
Because I think a lot of Saints fans are going to be thinking about, okay, well, last time that these two teams met, the Saints pass rush all of a sudden came to life. 7 sacks in that game. Tano Passanio with a career high. But that was against Tommy DeVito. What is it about Drew Lock that Saints fans need to know that maybe makes you feel a little bit, I don't know, does it make you feel better that it's Drew Lock as opposed to Tommy DeVito based upon what you saw last year? Like, where do you sit with that, and how should Saints fans feel about that?
Yeah, so the biggest difference is Tommy DeVito tended to hold the ball a little bit longer. You go back and you look at the sacks and the pressures that he endured last year and even this year in the start. And that was a result of, most of them, I should say, were a result of him just holding the ball, trying to be careful with the ball. Don't make a mistake. Don't turn it over. Don't throw it to the wrong guy. Don't let somebody swat it out of your hand. So Drew Lock, the thing with him, the biggest difference is he's quicker to process and make a decision. Does he always make the right decision? That's debatable.
Sure.
But he does make a quicker decision. He is probably, now Daniel Jones obviously not on the roster anymore, but of the 3 quarterbacks that they had to start the season, Drew Lock was probably the quickest to process in terms of the game.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Because the Saints lack the pass rush and they have not gotten takeaways in these last few games. So even when it comes to him making a quicker decision, even if it's the wrong decision, the Saints haven't been very opportunistic in that area at all so far over the course of the last few weeks.
It's amazing how similar these two teams are.
I know, right? Almost, it's wild. It's wild.
But anyway, the Giants with some injuries now. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball. Both starting tackles, Jermaine Illuminor, who's been playing left tackle, Andrew Thomas, of course, out for the year. So they actually, Illuminor is now, I think, their third left tackle since Thomas went down. Right side, Evan Neal, who's been just activate. Well, he was active, but he's been starting the last few games. He's banged up. He's got a hip injury. Jermaine Illuminor with a quad. So head coach Brian Daboll, speaking to the media today, said the 5 guys that didn't practice, being the 2 tackles and 3 others, which we'll talk about in a moment, week to week. But he's still hopeful. He's hopeful that, some of these guys will be available. Now, if Illuminor and Neal can't play, Saints fans, you're going to enjoy this one because the Giants are going to probably roll with Joshua Ezeudu at left tackle. He is not an offensive tackle, let alone a left tackle. Great kid, but he's more of a guard, if anything. And then you have Chris Hubbard at right tackle. He is a natural right tackle. He's the guy that they signed off the 49ers practice squad a few weeks ago. So some concern there about, having those 2 guys go up against that Saints pass rush. So if you're looking for that Saints pass rush to come alive, that's probably going to be the game that's going to do it.
Yeah, and it's going to be an old friend of the New York Giants. They could potentially be the one that really drives that, and that's going to be Chase Young, former Washington Commander. Chase Young's been really the best part of the New Orleans Saints pass rush, which they have a 30% pressure rate, which is very, very low in the league right now. But Chase Young, 5th in the NFL when it comes to total quarterback pressures with 51. So he's been the guy that's kind of been carrying that pass rush. On the opposite side of him has been Carl Granderson over on the other side. He's got 41, so he's not super far off at all, just 10 fewer pressures. But those 2 guys have kind of been the lifeblood of the New Orleans Saints pass rush so far. So both of them being ends, going up against this, is it fair for me to say patchwork tackle tandem? It looks like it might be. That could spell some success for the New Orleans Saints pass rush there, potentially.
And then just to add
advantage of this before, though, we've seen them not take advantage of this. We've seen it before.
Yeah, but just to add to that, Ross, the Giants lost their promising young tight end Theo Johnson for the rest of the year. He has a Liz Frank injury.
One of my favorite draft prospects.
Yes. So now it's like, okay, where do you put the help if you're the Giants? You can't have both sides. Where are you going to put the help? So that's a big question mark. Now, injuries are not exclusive just to the Giants offense. The Giants defense banged up. And this is where I'm really concerned because the Giants run defense has been probably worse, believe it or not, than the Saints. Okay. So Dexter Lawrence just went on IR this last week, or this week it might have been with the dislocated elbow. Raheem Nunez-Roches is on the injury report. He's got a burner. Okay. DJ Davidson, who's a defensive lineman, he's got a shoulder injury. I have no idea who's going to play defensive line. I mean, they've got this young undrafted rookie, Elijah Chapman, who's looked good. Jordan Riley is another one who is banged up. So there's concern there, obviously. But here's the big one for the Giants. There's the injuries up the middle. Now Bobby Okereke, their inside linebacker, a guy who never off the field and who could be so good, he's banged up. He's got a back injury. And again, I mentioned it before, the 5 guys that didn't practice today, Wednesday, Bobby Okereke being one of them, week to week, according to Brian Daboll. So I have no idea what they're going to do about the run defense. I mean, it was bad to start with a healthy Dexter Lawrence and a healthy Bobby Okereke. I have no idea what's going to happen now.
Yeah, and the Saints haven't had a ton of good things going for them so far this season, but one of the things that's been going great for them is Alvin Kamara. He's 106 rushing yards away from his first ever career 1,000-yard rushing season. He hasn't had it before, and he could potentially get that this week. He went over 100 rushing yards not too long ago. There's a chance that he does it here again, and this has been the bread and butter of the New Orleans Saints offense so far. is that run game. So that's something with all those injuries to that defensive front for the Giants that the Saints will need to be able to take advantage of. And look, that's been the lifeblood of their offense, right? In terms of setting up their passing game too. So I expect the Saints to lean very heavily, especially early on when it comes to that run game.
And also, just real quick, you mentioned the Saints passing game. Tay Banks, starting cornerback,
right. Yeah,
banged up with a rib. Today. He's another guy who may or may not play. So the Giants have some significant injuries, and it's just when it rains, it pours, and who knows how they're going to fill all this stuff. I suspect it'll be a Dory Jackson, Cordell Flott, but you know what? The defensive secondary has been a problem for the Giants all year long. Young group, a lot of talent, some promising stuff, talent there, but just inconsistent. And it's just been very frustrating. Teams come in and they just absolutely have rolled over the Giants. And then you throw in the fact that, the defensive scheme is not an ideal fit for the personnel they have. And it's just been an absolute mess for the Giants defense.
Rough. Yeah, it is very interesting, like how similarly the seasons have gone. 7-game losing streak right now for the Giants. The Saints are on a 7-game losing streak. Giants winless at home. The Saints only 1 win on the road. I mean, like there's a lot of symmetry to these two teams right now.
Yeah, but you know what? One of these teams has got to win on Sunday. So we're going to give you the keys to each team's path to victory on this crossover edition. Locked on Giants, Locked on Saints. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is also brought to you in part by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere in between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. And now you can get 3 months of premium wireless service for only $15 a month. Just go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. $45 upfront payment required, which is the equivalent of $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 GB on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com for details. All right, everybody, welcome back to the crossover edition, Locked on Giants, Locked on Saints. He is Ross Jackson of Locked on Saints. I am Patricia Traina of Locked on Giants. And one of these teams, Ross, is going to have to win on Sunday. It's either going to be the Giants, who, if they don't win this week, I don't think they're going to win at all the rest of the season with their schedule, or maybe the Saints pull it all together and come marching in and come marching out with a win. So, Ross, I want to start with you. What are your keys to a New Orleans Saints win?
Yeah, and of course, our Crossover Thursday brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, where you can get $50 instantly by putting down your first $5 lineup. Just head over to Prize Picks. You can download the app, and you can use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get that. When it comes to the Saints, I think the 3 things they got to do, they got to run the ball and control the clock. They, of course, also have to find pass game production with their wide receivers that doesn't rely on the home run ball. I'll explain that in a sec. And then winning in the red zone, I think, is the other big thing. So when it comes to running the football, they just kind of have to stick to their game plan, do what it is that offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak's offense needs them to do, right? That's what this offense is built upon. We've discussed that. Alvin Kamara. And they're going to probably get second-year running back Kendre Miller back, number 25. He's going to be a big one to watch as well. He's going to be the guy that's going to have to run between the tackles in order to complement the outside run game of Alvin Kamara. Without Taysom Hill, they need somebody to have that complementary attack. When it comes to the passing game, Patricia, listen. When the Saints had Rashid Shaheed, when they had Chris Olave, they were able to kind of dice up the passing game a little bit more involvement in the intermediate areas and stuff like that. Now, this passing game, mostly relies on the home run ball to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, former Green Bay Packer, former Buffalo Bill, former Kansas City Chief. He has been kind of the jolt for this team. He's got 8 receptions on the season on 10 targets, and 4 of them are touchdowns. 3 of those touchdowns are 40 plus yards, or 3 of his receptions are 40 plus yards. That has been a huge deal for them so far. So they have to find some way, though, to be able to move the ball in the passing game without having to rely on that home run. And then winning in the red zone. The Saints came up short in the red zone, 0 for 2 last week up against the Los Angeles Rams. But then they also, on the defensive side, let up 3 touchdowns on 3 red zone possessions for the Los Angeles Rams. That used to be a place where the Saints were phenomenal early on in the season, is defending the red zone and scoring in the red zone. Got to be able to run the football there. Got to be able to rely on Alvin Kamara there, especially now without Taysom Hill. So they've got to be able to find a way to do that, because that's going to probably be the difference in this game, is can you score when you're in striking distance? Because I don't expect either of these teams necessarily light it up in terms of the big explosive plays into the end zone. They might get there, but then they've got to be able to punch it in once they get into the get in between the 20s.
Again, so scary how similar the two teams are. The Giants, they can get to the red zone, but they've had their share of problems. But for the Giants, the biggest thing is that they've got to stop shooting themselves in the foot. All right, whether it's a penalty, whether it is a turnover, they've had turnovers in the red zone. They are not good enough to overcome these mistakes. And, they average roughly 1.8 stalled scoring drives, thanks to penalties on the offensive side of the ball, which is just makes you want to pull your hair out, because it's like tough. Here you are, you think, oh, they're moving the ball, they're going to get into the end zone, and then boom, there's a penalty, and now they've got to settle for a field goal. And as you know, Ross, field goals aren't going to cut it. In these types of games. So that's got to be priority number 1. You got to play as clean of a game as possible. No false starts, no ineligible men downfield, which has been a big problem for the Giants whenever they try to run a screen, all that stuff. You just can't have that. The other thing that the Giants absolutely positively need to do, and if they don't, you're going to hear me screaming in the press box, run the ball.
Oh, goodness.
Tyrone Tracy, baby. All right. Now, everybody's like, oh, Saquon's off in Philadelphia. Yeah, we all miss Saquon. I miss Saquon too. But you know what? Tyrone Tracy, the rookie who they got in the 5th round of the draft this year.
Another one of my favorites.
Pretty good. Mm-hmm. Been pretty good, that kid. Now, the thing is, he's had 2 fumbles, I think, in the last 3 games, which obviously has to be cleaned up. This goes back to what I said before about not making mistakes. But the other thing is, Brian Daboll, who is now calling the plays for the Giants, he's got to stick with the run. He has this bad habit, in my opinion, of abandoning the run too soon.
Yeah.
If you're down by 1 score, it's not like, you're down by 50 scores, where all of a sudden you got to go pass happy. But sometimes Daboll just gets away from the run. And I think, you have to play up to your strength, which right now I would say is probably the running game, against your opponent's weakness. And you mentioned it before, Ross, the Saints' run defense has just been atrocious, just as bad as the Giants, I dare say.
Yeah. And just for the specifics of this one too, where the Saints struggle the most in the run game, the Giants have produced the best. The Giants right now are 4th in the NFL when it comes to runs inside the tackles. The New Orleans Saints, bottom 11 when it comes to that. They're number 11 at the bottom side of it, right? 11th most yards allowed there. And that is where they've been consistently pushed off the line of scrimmage. So that's a place where they can find some success doing what it is that they already have done well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the other key I'll give you, Malik Neighbors. The kid's amazing. Here's what's interesting about Malik Neighbors. Since coming back from his concussion, he missed 2 games earlier in the season with a concussion. He has not had a 100-yard game. He has not had a touchdown reception since coming back. If he can't do it against the Saints defense, which has struggled against the deep ball in particular, then I don't know where he's going to be able to do it. I really don't, because look, the Saints have given up quite a few 20-plus yard pass plays. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're in the top 10 league-wide for the most 40-plus yards.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
So look, there's an opportunity if the offensive line can hold up. And again, I mentioned the offensive tackle situation. And let's not forget the interior, which has had its share of problems. But if they can get a few of those deep balls out there to Malik Neighbors, get him back on track, then this game has the potential to swing the Giants' way.
Yeah, Saints notoriously not a quick pressure defense either. They are a hold the coverage, let the pass rush get there on second and third efforts. It's one of the reasons why they're one of the teams in the NFL that has allowed the most time to throw to opposing quarterbacks, because they rely on the sort of symbiotic relationship between coverage and pass rush. But it's tricky to do that when the coverage isn't there, right? And that has been a big issue for New Orleans here as of late.
All right, Ross, before we call it a show, give me your best prediction. Doesn't have to be a score. I mean, who comes out on top?
Oh, that's a great question. Like if it's I was gonna say any prediction at all, I could come up with something. I think the Saints should be able to win this game, but I'm kind of with you. If they don't win this game, I don't know. I mean, they have the Raiders later on, so maybe that's a chance. The Saints are going to be playing three teams that at different points in the season have been considered the worst team in the NFL: the Carolina Panthers, the New York Giants, and then of course the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Saints have shared a little bit of that conversation themselves as well during that 7-game losing streak. And so they already lost the Carolina Panthers. They could potentially drop this one, but I think that they walk away with a win here. And I think it ends up being this really nice story for Darren Rizzi being able to go back to New Jersey and get a win in his hometown.
Yeah. Now for the Giants, I made a vow several weeks ago that I would not pick the Giants to win because they have not given me reason to believe.
Sure.
But I will say this, although I am not picking them to win this game because they just had this bad habit of going up against these teams that had bad run defenses, bad this, bad that. And they're like the cure-all, the fix-it-all. Suddenly the teams that were so bad in area A, B, and C, now they look like, all world teams. Right. But for the Giants, look, I mentioned the rest of their schedule. They have a date with Baltimore after this. They still have Philly one more time. They've got the Colts. They've got the Falcons. If the Giants can't get a win this week against the Saints team, because the two teams are so similar, and if the Giants cannot get a win this week, then I just don't see them getting a win the rest of the year. I mean, they're just big week. It's a big week. The Giants they're banged up. The quarterback situation is not really stable. It's just an absolute mess. It's been a long, long year for us here in the land of the Giants.
Yeah. And you got a head coach that's coaching for his job too. I mean, there's a lot of motivation for that Giants team.
Yes, and I will add this before we close off. At Brian Daboll's presser today, I don't think I've ever seen him the way he was today. Normally he's got energy, he's got fire, and he just seemed very beaten down. And I turned to a colleague and I said, my gosh, is it me or does Dieb look like he's just been beaten down and just worn out to a nub? And everybody kind of thought the same thing, just how he spoke, with eye contact, all that stuff. Yeah. So you could tell that this season has taken a toll on him. It's taken a toll on all of us. Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know. Every Monday when I do my show, I'm like, okay, how do I talk about the loss now?
Yeah, right. So I will say, Dennis Allen, we said the same thing about him the couple of weeks before he was dismissed. So it's a tough season when you're in a situation like that, for sure.
Well, hopefully I won't have to talk about a loss, but I have a feeling, like I said, they haven't given me any
reason. We get a tie. Huh?
Yeah, maybe we get a tie. I can live with that. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about some. All right, Giant fans. All right, Saints fans. That's going to do it for this edition of Crossover Thursday. Locked on Giants, Locked on Saints. Don't forget, we still have one more show for this week for you. Ross will be back on Friday. I'll be back on Friday on our respective channels. You can also find us on all the audio platforms wherever you get your podcasts. And please, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our respective channels. We would appreciate it. Click the bell to be notified when we put up new videos. And also like the video. It all helps us in the long run, and it is appreciated. Special thanks to our everydayers, newcomers, and everybody in between. You're all appreciated. For Ross Jackson, I'm Patricia Traina. We'll see you on our respective shows tomorrow, everybody. Have a good one.